Welcome to Relatively Speaking. Welcome to Relatively Speaking, the podcast where we explore thoughts, stories, and strategies behind how brands and customers interact with each other. This podcast is brought to you by Relativ, a marketing solutions agency based in Tokyo. I'm your host, Michi, and today I would like to introduce you to our guest, Jenessa. Thank you, Jenessa. Thank you for coming to this show. It's actually our very first podcast episode. So I wanted to just quickly ask about you and what you do here. What kind of things are you passionate about? What do you do at your job? So just very basic introduction about yourself.
So I am CX director, and in case you don't know what CX means, it stands for customer experience.
Okay.
And customer experience is basically the idea of when we interact with a brand and we have a great experience, and you don't even think that there's really that profession exists because it's a wonderful interaction with the brand. You don't have any frustrations or so on.
Right.
And my goal is to make that happen. When you have frustrations with a brand, that means that I have a job and I help kind of iron out those things for brands and their relationships with customers.
Interesting. Let's come back to that later because I think that's really interesting. I want to know more. But before we go into the main topic for today, we want to talk about inclusivity in design and also customer experience. But before we go into that, a little bit about your background. You said you are a CX director. Before you started CX or this type of profession, what did you do? Did you start your career in CX from the beginning, or did you have a different kind of background? If you could share.
So when I was studying in school, actually, CX didn't really exist as a profession, let alone websites or digital things or even social media. So
Right.
I actually went to design school and studied traditional graphic design and thought I would be a package designer at one point in my career.
Package, okay.
Package designer, which I guess is an experience, yeah.
Right, okay.
But I started off doing like traditional print design, and right at that time is when digital things were emerging in the world and social media was emerging. Twitter was born, for instance, and every brand was like, oh, we should do something on Twitter or X nowadays. And so I started to pivot from that print world into digital things. And as digital grew in sophistication and it became more about websites and then more about customer data and CRM or emails and things like that, that's when the CX industry was started to become born, because you now have many channels that you're interacting with a brand on, and you need to make sure that those all connect with each other. And a lot of times they don't. So it kind of evolved. I didn't pursue CX per se, but it just evolved with my career, and then it happened to be what I do now.
Interesting. So you mentioned that it didn't exist before the digital age, but what was like this moment where you thought like, that's interesting, I want to pursue this CX?
I think I didn't have a moment where it came into reality. I think it just kind of evolved into, as we think about multiple touch points with consumers, we think of this idea of omni-channel and then this connected experience. We want to make sure that a brand feels like a brand in this channel and this channel and this channel. And there's no friction points or frustrations and things like that. And that's kind of how I found my way into CX. There wasn't a pivotal moment per se, but it just happened as I got more into digital, to be honest.
Interesting. So you mentioned a couple times the phrase connected. So is it fair to say that CX and connection is very important, because we often talk about how to connect with brands, connect with consumers, and that sounds like it's a little bit different from designing a package. How would you see the importance of connection in CX?
So as a person, we're kind of all over the place. We do a little bit on social media. We do a little bit on websites. We go to stores sometimes. We talk with our friends. We have many touch points that we experience a brand on. And, we don't have preference always. We usually kind of go to a lot of these for different reasons. And that's why this idea of like making something consistent is important. And when you have a brand is the shortcut for people to understand this is what something stands for. I know that I can always get this type of thing from this brand or this type of experience. And if a brand is not connected or not consistent, it feels disjointed, and it sets customers' expectations in kind of the wrong way.
Right.
But if a brand is consistent, then they know that if they're engaging in this particular touch point or this particular touch point, it's always the same. And our customer doesn't feel any sort of frustration or things like that.
Right. And in the beginning, you mentioned about when you have a frustration, that's where you come in, right?
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that the role of CX or what you do is to remove this frustration between the business and the customers, or can you elaborate a little bit more if you have any examples you
Sure.
could share?
In a simplistic form, that's absolutely
Okay.
what I do. And it's usually the trigger point for a brand to engage my type of work. And so let's see, an example of that is probably something we'll talk a little bit more about later, is I was working for a healthcare brand. And this is a brand where you can go to the gym, they give you free gym access, and then they have specialized programs for the gym members. And in the beginning, when we were figuring out what we could do for them, they had said, a lot of people, A, don't know who we are, but B, they think that we're a brand that isn't for them at all. And when we did the research, we found out that a lot of consumers are kind of scared of the gym because they think that a gym is maybe for something that's somebody that does powerlifting and somebody that's a super hardcore gym person.
Right.
And if you think about your own friends, probably you have maybe one or two people that are that type of person, but most of us are not the super hardcore gym person.
Right.
And so the challenge that a lot of their consumers were facing is that's the perception of their brand. And when you go into a gym, usually there's not somebody hand holding you with them. And so you're kind of intimidated and you have this mental idea of, I'm not that person. I don't know how to use this equipment per se, or, I'm looking around and there's somebody that looks like they know what they're doing and such. And so how do we break down that intimidation factor?
Right.
Is one thing. And then how do we keep you excited on these days when you wake up and you really don't feel like going to the gym and, or you want to try that new thing that you've never done before. And so we helped create experiences that reduce this frustration that people had of being intimidated, of not having this idea that I'm a gym person, and help change their mindset of like, you can do this. And here's the simple steps of how you can do that. And here's some hand holding along the way.
Interesting. So is it fair to say that, to me, it's exciting, but would you say it's rather qualitative, or is there also quantitative aspect to what you do?
Yeah, it can be both, definitely. But usually in the beginning is qualitative, and figuring out what is the human side of something and that human insight that we're feeling, or that pain point and that frustration. It can be starting from something quantitative. So a lot of times we talk to brands when we're frustrated. We call the complaint because something broke, I hate it that this happened or something like that.
Right.
And that is quantitative data that a lot of brands have about their experience. And that tells us, if we look at all of that, this is clearly a pain point and a frustration. But then that only tells us what it is. It doesn't tell us why. And that's where the qualitative thing becomes really important, because in order for us to fix things, we have to know why.
Right. That's interesting. You said, so when consumers complain about something, or when you see an actual frustration, you know what is happening. But in order to resolve these issues, you mentioned the why is important.
Yeah.
How do you get to these why through your lens, or how through through what you do?
I think it's really important that we talk to people, basically. So qualitative research is something that I do almost in every single project, almost. Sometimes clients don't want to pay for it, and then we do like social listening or something like that. But it's always the voice of the customer, because you don't want to, as a human, you don't want somebody to speak for you. You want to share your own voice and your own opinions. So it's much more valuable hearing from that individual or that group of customers from that particular brand than me making assumptions about their experience. But if budget's an issue, sometimes we're forced into that.
Yeah. So you talk to different people, and then you try to identify why this happened.
Yes.
And when you identify the core reason, or the root of these issues, then you say, okay, against these things, we have a solution.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sometimes it could be, helping the customer realize something themselves, but sometimes it's also like business operations. So it may be a lot of companies sometimes are set up where this group doesn't talk to this group, or the system isn't connected. And if it could be, it could reduce that pain point a customer is experiencing. An awesome everyday example is if you buy something online and you want to return it, or something broke, or you have a question, then you go to the store and you talk to the store staff and they say, oh, we don't know anything about this moment.
Because you bought it online.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So that's where the connection part becomes important.
Yeah.
Because from the customer's point of view, it doesn't matter if you bought it online or if you bought it offline.
Right.
You bought it from the brand.
Right, exactly.
Right. Interesting.
And another aspect of connection that's really important, we at Relative believe in the relationships and people and the connection that brands have with people. And a lot of times this becomes really important when you have a client-based business. So in luxury, there's oftentimes a client advisor or something like that. In the gym example I talked about, there's staff that are working the gym, and they become the brand. They become that essence, or humanized essence of what the brand is, right? And so sometimes we also have to think about, like, how do we facilitate relationships from that brand representative and that customer, and continue that relationship time and time and time again, and make it not be about other people coming into that relationship, but rather strengthen between those two individuals.
Interesting. Thank you. So you mentioned about the people that work for the brand, representing the brand. And I want to go into a little bit about inclusivity in design. Can you briefly explain what this is about? I'm fairly new to this concept. I would assume it's part of this CX design or UI UX, but how is it different from the typical thinking of UI UX customer experience?
So I'll start with what is inclusive design, and then we'll answer how does it connect to CX. So the idea of inclusive design is that design should be something that everybody can be comfortable with. And if we have the best experiences, we're designing for as many people as possible. But that doesn't mean like a universal design, meaning one solution for everybody. That means whatever your needs as a human being are, we've tailored for that particular person. And maybe it's slightly different for another person. So we're building essentially like flexibility into customer experiences so that you can have what you need and this other person can have what they need. Now, accessibility is something also very similarly related, but that tends to be about a physical disability, whether it's cognitive or something physical like sightedness or hearing, or having legs or arms and things like that. But inclusive design is a little bit broader than just straight accessibility. And then when we talk about CX design, it is a part of inclusive design. So when we have great CX, we are being inclusive to all different types of our customers.
Interesting.
And so in the gym example that I talked about, the inclusive part of that is understanding that you might be a person that loves getting feedback where it's like, no, harder, stronger, go, right? And you need this like a little bit more harsh type of coaching. But you might also have a person that needs a softer side of things, like, great job, you're making so much progress, that was awesome, right? And as a brand, we want to think about consistency that I said earlier, but it's also important to know that sometimes people need feedback in different modals and to engage in different modals. So what we did is we designed different coaching methodologies for the gym based on the types of things that you need or that those customers needed in that particular moment, and gave the consumer, the gym goer, flexibility in how they wanted that. So it all comes back to being flexible as a brand to understand our customers need different things from us. And so we're going to design an experience that will shape and mold to what they're telling us they need, and giving them choice.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So my understanding is that it's a way to balance between being the brand itself, but also trying to meet the needs of different types of customers. Okay. So is it also personalization in a sense that, okay, we're this brand, so we want to be seen as this kind of sentiment, and you want to make sure that you are able to kind of deliver the different messages or experience to different types of customers.
Yeah, you could absolutely think of it as personalization.
Mm,
I would just say one particular thing, though.
mm,
Oftentimes, when we work on personalization
mm,
things, it's something that's chosen for you as a consumer. So the brand will personalize based on the data that they already know about you.
mm.
But if the consumer hasn't said, I want this,
Right, right.
then it's not necessarily inclusive. If they have had the choice to say, yes, I want it in this way,
Mm.
then it's inclusive.
Right, right. Okay. Interesting, interesting. So, if I may, I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate.
Sure.
So, I think now I understand what inclusivity in design means through the examples that you shared. But in marketing, in principle, you want to make sure you are very specific about the target audience that you want to speak to. To me, that sounds being exclusive, right? You have a specific target you want to pursue, but inclusivity is about making sure no one gets left out. Is it something that contradicts, or is it a different level of thinking? How would you
It's a great
answer?
question.
Okay.
You can't target everybody unless you have
Yes.
unlimited funds,
Yeah.
right?
Mm,
And not all brands are something that everybody wants. So you do have to focus for sure. But
mm,
within that focus, how do you be accessible to as many people as possible?
mm,
So for instance, if you're for people that live in a certain geographic demographic
mm,
or certain geographic area,
mm.
know that other people from other places may come in. And
Right.
so how do you
Yeah.
not break the mold? So here we're in Tokyo, we have tourists, we have
Mm,
people like myself who are a foreigner living in Tokyo. So it's about understanding that there are edge cases
mm, mm,
to the core target audience of people living in Tokyo, and making sure that those people have a way to interact as well, or an option essentially.
mm, mm, mm.
But yes, brands have to focus. So it's not target everybody and
Right.
be something for everyone.
I
That
see.
would
I
be
see.
really, really difficult.
Understood. Thank you. Okay, that's interesting. All right. So, Janessa, I wanted to understand. I understand the value of inclusivity and also CX in general, but from a business point of view, I feel like it's not getting enough recognition, or probably not getting enough attention. From your experience or from your point of view, can you tell us why it is the case? To me, it feels like that's not the most important thing. So you got to focus on the product first, or you have to focus on development first. It seems like, oh, it's a nice to have.
Mm.
Why is that the case, and how can we change that? And how do you think we could change that?
It's a great question. So
Mm,
obviously, yes, we have to prioritize as a business, and
mm,
we do need a good product or and things like that to start
mm,
with for sure. But when we think about inclusivity, usually a lot of businesses go straight towards accessibility. And
mm,
accessibility are things like making sure that your color contrast on your website is okay,
mm,
that you
mm,
have text that can scale so that people who are like me, who have some vision issues, can be able to read and things like that. And that's something where it's usually an ongoing research process and something that you have to monitor. And it's definitely a cost center.
mm, mm, mm,
Inclusivity, though, can be a profit center, because if you think about it from a product design standpoint, how do we enhance our product to make sure that it has the largest possible target audience possible?
right.
Then we're adding features to it that make it more usable and more adaptive to different types of people.
Mm, mm.
So the feedback idea that I mentioned makes the product actually more valuable
Right, right.
than what it was
Mm,
when it didn't have that.
mm,
So it's a slight shift
mm,
in thinking about, who are we, or rather, how can we enhance this experience and add extra value from
mm,
the business standpoint. And the other point is, off from accessibility,
mm,
we think about a very small target audience. We
mm,
think about those people with disabilities usually. And so that feels like an edge case.
mm,
But if you think about inclusivity, and you think about all those moments in your own life where you've been frustrated by a brand and you're like, why didn't this work?
mm,
Why couldn't I experience this? Why was this not possible? Or
mm,
why did they not let me do this?
mm,
That's a moment where inclusive design can solve for. And
mm.
that's pretty much universal. I've yet to meet somebody who cannot give me an example of a moment in their life where they felt or didn't feel excluded at some
Right,
point
right.
from a particular company.
Mm.
And that tells you inclusive design actually is universal, and we can solve for a lot more things than just thinking about accessibility only.
Right, right. Interesting. Okay. Thank you, thank you. So you did mention that the inclusiveness could actually turn into a profit center for the business.
Mm.
Do you know of any example where a company or brand has actually introduced this way of thinking and actually increased,
Yeah,
commercial side of things?
absolutely. There's a lot of examples in our everyday life.
Mm,
So, if you've ever used Siri or any sort of voice to text type of things,
mhm,
that was centered around inclusive design originally. It was meant for people more with physical disabilities to be able to use technology devices. And
mhm.
now it allows us to use devices hands-free. It
Right.
allows physicians to be able to take notes when they're in office rather than sitting at the computer and typing. They can just verbally say it to their computer in some note-taking things in the physician's office. Same thing for closed captions. Those were originally invented as well from the disabled community's standpoint, but now we see it all over Instagram and TikTok, and more people are listening to videos without audio and reading captions now
Right. Right.
than ever before. And another great example is actually in the gaming community.
Mm,
So if you think about game controllers of the past, especially maybe the last 20 years, a lot of them were two-handed. And so that creates some physical barriers for certain types of people. So there's actually a whole new product line with some manufacturers that allow you to be able to control the game with different types of devices, or sometimes it's computer controls and things like that.
mm.
And it's a whole new product line for them that us as ordinary people can also purchase and use, and it makes sense in certain situations depending on your home setup, or if you're
Mm,
commuting, or things like that.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
then they've designed the games to be able to be controlled by different types of devices.
Right. Interesting. So now, now that I hear all these examples from you, to me it sounds like it's inclusive, but on the other hand, it feels like it's expanding the brand to different types of people,
Yeah,
different touch points. That's interesting. Okay. So that's how we as a brand or as a company can continue to grow and continue to optimize so that we can serve for broader types of audiences.
yeah, absolutely. And the operational side of things, there's
Mm,
also a really cool example here in Tokyo.
mm,
And it's a cafe that is entirely, except for maybe a few people, remotely operated. So if you
okay.
think about what it means to be an employee, usually that means like a physical space that you're going to, usually.
Hmm.
And especially here in Japan, it's usually face-to-face communications up till the pandemic, right?
Mm,
But this cafe thought about, well, what is a person's asset? What is an employee's asset?
mm,
And most people have some sort of thing that they can do.
mm.
And if given the right devices and equipment, they can do that remotely. So
Okay.
this cafe gave those pieces of equipment to people who
Mm.
needed or preferred to work from home. And now they're actually operating robots in a physical cafe environment that are serving the coffee with people and interacting face to face. So it would be, imagine if you're the patron and I'm the robot
Mm.
at this cafe, and me is being controlled by somebody else who's
Interesting.
remote at their home.
Mm,
What's really cool about that
mm,
is
mm,
they have employees from different countries
mm.
operating or working in the cafe here in Tokyo. And they also have people that don't speak a certain language that the patrons may do. So, if you came to the cafe and you spoke German or something, and I
Mm.
only spoke Japanese, then we could communicate through the tools that they have and through AI.
Wow.
And they're also helping people who have other physical disabilities and so on be employed, and in some cases, some cognitive challenges as well.
That's cool. Sorry,
Yeah.
if I may ask, what's the name of the cafe?
The cafe is called Dawn Cafe.
Dawn Cafe.
Yeah, Dawn, DAWN Cafe.
DAW DAWN Cafe in Tokyo. It sounds like science fiction.
It's not science fiction, it's real life.
Oh, this one?
Yes. And what
Wow.
I think is nice about that is, yes, the customer experience is very interesting and quite unique.
Mm,
But operationally,
mm,
they have thought about some of the challenges that we would normally think about, and they have kind of broadened their thinking about how do we employ the most amount of people possible,
mm.
and redefined what it means to essentially be an employee, or what an employee can be capable of.
Right. Wow. This is actually, yeah, I was actually going to ask you about, are there upcoming trends or technologies that you're excited about? But this is it's actually cool. Dawn Cafe.
We can take a side trip.
Yes, we could do another podcast episode there. So, wanted to ask, are there any upcoming trends or technologies or cultural things that you are excited about?
There are two trends and things that are things to watch out for. So the first one is a really big thing that's happening this summer in terms of accessibility
Okay.
that will impact the whole world, but it's happening in Europe. It's called the European Accessibility Act. It goes into effect, I think, is June 8th or June 28th, one of the two of those. And people have a grace period to adapt to it. But why it's so important is that it's important for anybody that has a European customer, which can mean companies here, because there are Europeans living in Japan, European tourists, and so on. And what is changing about current legislation that exists, at least the way I understand it, is that it's broadening accessibility standards to all things digital. So it might mean ATMs, or it might mean kiosks that you have interactions with at airports. It's not just about websites or apps anymore.
Okay.
So it's broadening accessibility requirements for all things digital across a whole plethora of industries. Basically, if you do anything digital, it's going to impact you. So anything electrical, essentially. And it will impact anyone with an EU customer, which basically means everyone. So I'm really excited for this because it's going to mean that a lot of businesses are going to be encouraged and motivated to change, especially if they are an international company that has a footprint that's really strong in Europe. It will mean something. And then gradually that's going to start to change experiences all over the world just because of the EU's actions that they're taking. Now, there's a grace period, so it's not going to happen overnight. But why I'm so excited is if you think back maybe 10 years ago, there was a thing called GDPR, General Data Protection. I forget the exact terminology, but basically it's the legislation that was passed. That's the reason why we have to say, yes, I accept all these cookies, I accept these permissions for brands and so on. And that gave us all as ordinary citizens agency over how brands are using our data and what data they can use and so on. And that was a European-led initiative. And then now we see it all over the world. And all over, certainly here, businesses in Japan have them too. So I anticipate that in time, 5-10 years or so, we're going to have that same type of agency as ordinary human beings, but about more things related to accessibility. And then eventually inclusivity will be folded into that, which makes me really, really excited for what the future is.
Interesting. I did not know about that at all. So thank you for sharing that. Sorry, what it was? It's called
the European Accessibility Act.
European Accessibility Act. Okay, and you were saying that it's going to improve the accessibility of.
Yeah, it's creating regulations that businesses need to adhere to in order to be do business in the European Union. It's not optional, it's mandatory. And so that will require all businesses to change. Now, there are some exceptions. If you're a small business, obviously it might be hard for you to meet this and so on. But what's great about it is every European country also has ramifications if you don't adhere to these regulations. So there's definitely a punishment, if you will, and a motivation for companies that's oftentimes financial, which means more companies are going to change their digital experiences so that it can be more inclusive of more people.
Interesting. Okay, European Accessibility Act. Yes, I'm seeing a few articles also in Japanese, but you're saying it's going to kick in sometime in June.
Yes, exactly, of this year, 2025.
Okay, interesting. You said there's two things that you wanted to share, but I actually want to go a little bit into about this European Accessibility Act because it sounds really interesting. So I'm just trying to imagine how it would actually come to life. The GDPR example, to me, it sounds very easy to imagine. It's about cookies. And this is more about accessibility. So are there like specific criterias that they're saying, okay, if you have, let's say, a membership program or like some kind of an app that requires you to subscribe and whatnot, are there like these checklists that you need to go through? Or how does it work?
Yeah, exactly. So there's actually like accessibility a checklist that you can go through and accessibility crawls that you can do and audits that you can do to understand how is your digital experience performing against the standards that that are currently set and then will be set. And they go through things like, is the color contrast accessible to people with color blindness? Is the text scalable for people, like I was saying, older eyes often need larger text print. So the Apple iPhone is a great example. You can change the text size of your iMessages, right? There's also the idea of metadata. So a lot of times screen readers or even search engines are actually reading the metadata, which is data that you wouldn't necessarily see on the homepage, but it's in the code of the website that talks about this image is this is what this web page is about, this button does this particular action and will take you here. And all of those things help people be able to use those digital products. So this legislation takes it a step further beyond just websites and apps and takes those standards and applies it to all things digital, essentially. Wow. Those are just a few things.
Okay, interesting. And so thank you for explaining. I think I kind of get what that new European Accessibility Act, did I get it right?
Yes.
Is trying to achieve. And I don't know if you have the answer to this, but it makes me think these new law or ways of protecting the customers in a general sense, it feels like it's always coming from Europe.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why? Is it because people in Europe know about the importance of inclusivity in design or UI UX, or do you know anything about?
It's a great question. I don't have like the golden answer, I think, for this, but I think that they think about accessibility in a broader sense of the terms than maybe some of the other markets. But if we think about what our strength here is in Asia, well, specifically Japan, I would say it is customer experience, and it's the service aspect. We don't necessarily have words for accessibility and haven't necessarily formalized it the way that the Europeans have, but you can look at certain experiences that happen in our everyday life here in Japan, such as walking down the street, and we have yellow roads that are tactile for people who need that to navigate. We also have experiences in the trains where you can reserve that you're riding the train, and then the station staff will meet you at a particular station and help you get off the train with adding a little bit of ramp if you have a wheelchair and things like that. So there are a lot of experiences already embedded in Japanese culture. Even the idea of omotenashi is one of my favorite ideas of this idea of thinking about your audience and kind of predicting all of the needs that they might have, and this ultimate satisfaction that Japanese people have for delivering on a great experience for customers is, in a way, accessibility to me, inclusive design, because you're anticipating people's needs.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, so you shared some examples about Japan, and I'd like to come back to that later, but if I recall, the initial question was, are there upcoming trends and technologies you're excited about? The first one was about the European Accessibility Act.
Yes.
What would be the second one?
The second one is AI. So everybody, I get points for saying the buzzword, I think, but everybody talks about AI, right? And then the future will be powered by AI, whatever. And it's definitely true. We're seeing more and more AI applications in business and in our everyday life, for sure. But I think the thing that we need to watch out for with AI is that it is powered by the data that exists today.
Yep.
And in the data that exists today, of course, there's a lot of inconsistencies on the business side of what they know about their customers. And one of the big gaps, I think, is what we talked about in the beginning. Why? A lot of times customers know what, or businesses know what, they don't know why. And they don't know the how come piece of the data. That means that the AI is going to learn what the problem is, and not why the problem exists.
Yeah.
And we need to really work on creating data about why. And as we talked about, that's qualitative data. That's talking to people. That's real people's voices. And I don't think that we often do enough of that when it comes to client work. We do a lot of research here at Relative, but when I look at broadly at our industry and broadly how businesses work, we do a lot of quant studies. There's a lot of that going on the internet. Are you happy with this purchase? And so on. But not a lot of businesses talking to consumers, co-creating with them. And that's really important, because doing that is going to create data sets that then can power the AI with our voices, not just what our actions were in the past.
So is it fair to say that AI, we often talk about, how it could change things, but in your mind, the exciting thing is that how can we feed the Y type of data. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about. And I'm excited, how much AI is changing the way that the world operates. It's really interesting to think about the future, but it's also this cautionary tale of like, we can't lose sight of this human aspect in this why, or else we're going to perpetuate biases that exist today in today's data and lose sight of really this human connection.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay. So we talked about the two exciting trends that you are excited about. And if we could come back to the topic about Japan, because we're headquartered in Tokyo, you shared some examples about, the motenashi, the train stations, and how the staff could support you and whatnot. But are there any specific examples that you actually faced working here and you thought, that's interesting, or other examples where you thought that's bad experience? Or if you could share both, that would be great.
Sure. There's a couple of examples I think that are really interesting. So when there's a lot of companies that are headquartered elsewhere that happen to do business here in Japan or that have customers, and a lot of times it's efficient for a business to operate where they've got a certain set of assets that all markets, please use this asset, this is our brand image and so on. It's very, very common, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times we might get those assets here and we'll look at the assets and say, that's interesting, because our consumers, our customers will be able to look at that and know that that was not made for this particular market. So an obvious one is of course the people in there, and if there's more Caucasians than Japanese people, but there's subtleties to it. Taxis look different here.
Yeah.
Outlets look different here. Kitchens look different. Apartments look different, and things like that. So I'm really talking about localization, and the act of localizing assets and localizing content is really, really important. Can't be underestimated in this market. And localization is inclusive, because
essentially,
it's telling almost subconsciously the Japanese consumer that we have thought about those things that are in your everyday life and we've included them in this type of work.
Right.
And rethinking how we name products is also really important to be inclusive here, because in Japan, we have certain phrases that other markets may not have. So for instance, I have pierced ears. This is called not earrings, but pierced, right? Yeah. And so there's different phrases.
Good example.
May tell a consumer here, they really know me, or they really don't know me. Thinking about me specifically. So we do a lot of that actually here at Relativ, in especially for those larger clients that are headquartered elsewhere and working on doing business here.
Right.
Now, the other example too, I think, comes into form fields. And here in Japan, if it's a Japan-based company, a lot of times I feel excluded. And the reason is because of how the Japanese language is set up. So if anyone's watching and isn't familiar with that, as you know yourself, but I'll explain it for other people, there's kind of three sets. So there's kanji, and then there's hiragana, and then, which I call kanji light, and then there's katakana. Yeah. And so most of the time, my name is in the katakana form, because that's used for foreign words, as you know. Right? Yeah. But oftentimes form fields are asking for my kanji name, but I don't have a kanji name.
Right.
And I have the actually fourth version, Romanji name, that happens to be able to be spelled in the katakana format. And happens to be able to be spelled in the hiragana format, but cannot be spelled in the kanji format, for how I know. So many, many form fields in Japan for businesses that typically have catered to the local audience and not necessarily foreign people or tourists, will ask for my kanji name. And what do I do there? And sometimes
what do you actually do?
And I'll try Romanji. Sometimes I'll get an error. Then I'll try katakana, and sometimes I'll get an error. Then I'll try hiragana, and sometimes I'll get an error. And then in which case I'm out of options, because I cannot use that company's site.
What do you do then?
I cannot use their site. Maybe I'll call them if it's an option.
Right.
But I am excluded from doing business with that company. Sometimes that's intentional, but a lot of times it's not. And it's just because a person at some point didn't realize that maybe there's some edge cases here, or some Japanese nationals who have a name that's spelled in Romanji that they don't use the kanji for some reason.
Right. Actually, that's a really good example, because even I feel frustrated with these forms that you need to fill out. And I don't know if you've come across these situations where you have like half space and full space. What is that supposed to do? Like it doesn't benefit anyone. But I think that, as you mentioned, it is something you need to improve to ensure you support different types of people. And now that you mentioned about kanji, I don't have a kanji. That's ridiculous. It's we need to fix that. 'Cause to me, for me as a local, yes, it's like it's a no-brainer. Here's my kanji name. Here's how I write it in alphabet. I can write it in different ways, but for those who don't have a name in kanji, it's why would you even ask that? So I think you're right. That's a really good example, and I think there's a lot of companies that can still improve these kind of form inputs. So
I think the flip side is also good, because I think if you think about what is my identity as my name, it's Jenessa, and the ideal
yes.
version of my name is not katakana or hiragana. It's spelled in the Romanji way. But I think I'm speaking on behalf of people here, but I believe like if you were born with a kanji name, that's probably the most core identity of
Yeah.
who you are. And so companies that are foreign might also not understand that. And the reverse might be true, where
True,
you're
true.
asking for the Romanji version or the English characters, but you want to put the kanji characters, I would
Yes.
imagine, if that was your name. So it definitely goes both ways.
Yep.
And another point on form fields is addresses. So the way Japanese addresses are set up is completely different than addresses in the rest of the world.
Yep. Yep.
And that's a very, very strong indicator that the company is a foreign company if the actual address field is set up to be more in the Western way versus what we see here in Japan, which is the most so-called first, usually.
Interesting. Interesting. Yes. I can imagine so many cases where I really did feel frustrated in those form fields. And you're right. If you are not local, you must have gone through a lot more of these cases. So now that we've gone through these really daily examples, it's not even about, business and how do we drive commercial results. It's like day-to-day activities. There's so many opportunities for companies to improve how they, work with customers. Um, just wanted to start closing this conversation. If you are a designer or someone who's trying to get into UI UX or a customer experience, where should they start?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice?
Sure. I have two main pieces of advice. So
Okay.
when it comes to design in general and inclusivity, I would say start with yourself first and look at what we've been talking about. Aspects of your daily life where you have felt extremely frustrated, you have felt not included, or you've been like, oh, that was awful. That could be so much better. And that's telling you an opportunity.
Right.
And then start to explore that. If it would be better, what would it be like? And then who else would that benefit if this was better? And that's a design opportunity there. And starting to train yourself in that type of thinking is going to make you much better at customer experience. It's going to help teach you where inclusivity opportunities are in your everyday life, and think through those things for your clients. Then you can start to talk to other people and have them share the same types of things, just as we've been doing.
Yeah.
And as you, I think, just experienced, you'll start to see those things in your own mind as well. And then you can grow from there, because it will become easier to talk to clients, customers in that way. The other thing is there's a really wonderful framework that is the beginning of inclusive design from Microsoft. And there's a book out there called Mismatch. Mismatch was put out by a woman named Kat Holmes. And in that, it talks about a framework that shows that oftentimes we think about accessibility, like we were saying, people with physical disabilities of some sort. Yes, this is that book. And in that book, they'll talk about the idea that maybe somebody who is living with blindness, they need those captions that we were talking about earlier. But actually, those captions are benefiting other people in other contexts. Like, I'm not looking at my phone, or I'm not able to listen to sound right now because I'm on the train. Those captions are helping me in that particular moment, because in that particular moment, I'm not able to hear. I was talking about blindness, but I'm talking about deafness. Forgive me, but you get the idea that the book talks about physical disabilities can also solve solving for physical disabilities can also solve for other customers' needs.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting, because sometimes we have permanent challenges, and sometimes we have situational challenges. In one particular moment, we might not be able to do something. I might not be able to use my hands. I might feel really challenged by something in this moment. I might not be familiar with this new place I've traveled to, and that's all situational. That's not necessarily permanent. So it'll give you an idea of what inclusive design is and how you can start thinking through it if you use that.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I gotta read this now. Mismatch by Cat Holmes. Cool, awesome, thank you. Okay, so I just asked you a question about if you were to get into UI, UX, customer experience from the designer's point of view, but from the business point of view, I feel like there's still a lot of companies or businesses that still don't see the value yet. How can we change that? Or like how should we start?
I think the entry point for this is how it has been for quite some time, is pain points.
Okay,
So
yeah,
the
yeah.
idea that we talked about a little bit earlier is if you optimize those pain points, you now have a more valuable product.
Yeah.
If you fix those things. And so as a business, where to start? Where are your customers' frustrations? Where are their pain points? If you don't know, talk to them. Or look at call center data if you have it. Look at social media if you're able to access that. Or look on Reddit. Now, if you're a business here in Japan, it's also important to know how Japanese customers behave, and you're probably less likely to find those online. And it's more important to talk to people in person in interviews. And it's also important to know, sometimes that rapport needs to be built up before people will tell you all of their frustrations. So definitely be really careful if you're a business based here in Japan.
Interesting. Cool. Thank you. So perhaps if I could say this is the last question, there's still a lot that we can talk about, and this is really, really exciting. But yeah, thank you, Jenessa. I wanted to ask you the last question. Where do you see the future of inclusivity in design?
That's a big question. Well, I see it, we talked about trends, and we talked about how AI and some legislation is changing. So I think it's going to become an even more important topic and a part of everyday business. The other thing that is happening here in Japan is there's a lot of conversation about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. And inclusive design is very much a part of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals on a worldwide scale. And here in Japan, there's a lot of focus on SDGs, and in particular, needing to help build inclusive environments for women, for younger populations as well. So I think it's only going to get stronger and stronger here in Japan. So I'm excited for the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you very much. So thank you, Jenessa, for your time. It was a really exciting time that I can't believe just time flies, but it was really, really a lot to learn. And now I know about the upcoming laws. And yeah, I feel like I learned a lot of things in just this short amount of time, but it was really exciting. So thank you again for your time. And so if you thought that this podcast was exciting, please subscribe to our channel, and you know where to look out for us. And also, Jenessa, if the audience wants to know more about inclusivity in design or customer experience, where can they find you?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn, actually. I have coined myself on all platforms, Express Anything. So on LinkedIn is linkedin.com/express anything, or you can also search for my name on LinkedIn, but be sure to spell it right.
We should probably have a caption or some kind of a...
Jenessa.
Okay, all right. Got it. Cool. Thank you very much. And so I think we'll see you in the next episode.